Before we begin, I want you to imagine this happening to you. What would you do? If you enjoy stories that make you think and feel, make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps this channel grow. And tell me in the comments what you would have done.
The gunshot echoed through the marble corridor, and Eleanor Bennett knew she had 10 seconds to decide: run toward the man bleeding on the floor or save herself. 3 weeks ago, she'd been invisible, a waitress serving coffee to strangers who never looked twice. Now she stood in a mansion surrounded by armed men, her hands shaking as Luca Moretti's blood pooled beneath her feet. His dark eyes met hers across the chaos, and in that moment, she understood the truth he'd been hiding. Loving a man like him meant choosing between safety and surrender. She'd already made her choice. Want to see how one cup of coffee led to this moment? Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city below so I can see how far Eleanor's story travels. The cafe smelled like burnt espresso and broken dreams. Eleanor Bennett had worked at Cafe Marone for 3 years, and in that time, she'd become a master of invisibility. She moved through the cramped space between scratched tables and mismatched chairs like a ghost, refilling cups and clearing plates while customers looked straight through her. She'd perfected the art of being present without being seen, a skill that came naturally when the world had spent most of your life teaching you that you didn't matter. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late September when everything changed. The lunch rush had ended, leaving behind a scattering of regulars: the college student who nursed a single cappuccino for 4 hours, the businessman who never looked up from his laptop, the elderly woman who always left exact change. Eleanor was wiping down the counter when the bell above the door chimed. She glanced up out of habit, and her hand froze mid-wipe. 3 men entered first. They moved with the coordinated precision of wolves, their eyes scanning the cafe with an intensity that made the air feel thinner. They wore dark suits that probably cost more than Eleanor made in 6 months, and beneath their jackets she caught the telltale bulge of concealed weapons. The cafe's ambient chatter died instantly. Even the espresso machine seemed to quiet its usual hiss. Then he walked in. Luca Moretti commanded attention without demanding it. He was tall, perhaps 6'2", with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, all sharp angles and calculating eyes the color of smoke. He moved with unhurried confidence, as if he'd already measured every person in the room and found them wanting. His charcoal suit was impeccable, his shoes polished to a mirror shine, and when his gaze swept across the cafe, Eleanor felt the temperature drop 5 degrees. Their eyes met for exactly 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds, Eleanor felt something she couldn't name, like being seen and cataloged and assessed all at once. Then his attention moved on, and she was invisible again. "Table by the window," one of his men said, his voice low and clipped. They took their positions with military efficiency. 2 men sat at adjacent tables, creating a perimeter. The third remained standing near the door, and Luca Moretti sat down in the chair facing the entrance, his back never to the door, his posture relaxed but ready. Eleanor's co-worker, Maria, gripped her arm. "Do you know who that is?" she whispered, her accent thick with fear and excitement. "No," Eleanor said, but her pulse was racing. "That's Luca Moretti. The Moretti family." Maria's eyes were wide. "Eleanor, those people own half this city. The other half just doesn't know it yet." Eleanor had heard whispers, of course. Everyone in the city had. Whispers about families that operated in the shadows, about empires built on loyalty and fear, about men who could make problems disappear with a phone call. But whispers were just that, stories told in the dark, easily dismissed in daylight. Except now one of those whispers was sitting 20 feet away, expecting service. "You take him," Maria said quickly. "I'm not going near that table." "Maria, please, my cousin, he got involved with people like that. We didn't see him for 6 months." Maria's hand trembled as she untied her apron. "I'll cover the register. You do the floor." Before Eleanor could protest, Maria had disappeared into the back, leaving her alone with a cafe full of tension and a man who radiated danger like heat. Eleanor took a breath. She'd survived worse than difficult customers. She'd survived growing up in foster care after her parents died in a car accident when she was 8. She'd survived aging out of the system at 18 with nothing but her grandmother's bracelet and a fierce determination to make something of herself. She'd survived 3 years of night school while working double shifts, watching her dreams of becoming a teacher slowly drown in student debt and impossible rent. She could survive serving coffee to a man in an expensive suit. She grabbed her notepad and walked to his table. Up close, Luca Moretti was even more striking and more intimidating. His face was all hard lines and harder angles, with a scar that cut through his left eyebrow like a signature. But it was his eyes that stopped her. They were intelligent, calculating, and utterly cold. Eyes that had seen things Eleanor couldn't imagine and had long ago stopped being surprised by the darkness in the world. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "What can I get for you?" He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied her with the same intensity he'd used on the room earlier. His gaze traveled from her face to her name tag to her hands, taking in every detail. Eleanor fought the urge to fidget. "Espresso," he said finally. His voice was deep, with a slight accent she couldn't quite place. "Italian, maybe, or Sicilian. Double shot, no sugar." "Of course. And for your—" She gestured vaguely at his companions. "Nothing for them." Eleanor nodded and turned to go, but his voice stopped her. "You're new." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "I've worked here 3 years, yet I've never seen you." He tilted his head slightly, and she realized he was genuinely puzzled. "I come here twice a month." "I guess I blend in," Eleanor said. Something flickered in his eyes. Interest, perhaps, or amusement. No one blends in. They're simply not worth noticing. "Which are you?" The question felt like a trap. Eleanor met his gaze evenly. "I'll get your espresso." She walked away before he could respond, her heart hammering against her ribs. Behind the counter, she focused on the familiar ritual of pulling a perfect shot, grinding the beans, tamping the grounds, watching the dark liquid drip into the small cup. The routine steadied her hands. When she returned to his table, she found him reading something on his phone, his expression unreadable. She set the espresso down carefully, and he glanced up. "Thank you." He looked at her name tag. "Eleanor." The way he said her name made her skin prickle, like he was filing it away somewhere in that calculating mind. "Anything else?" "No?" He lifted the cup, inhaling the aroma before taking a sip. His expression didn't change, but he set the cup down with something that might have been approval. "It's good." "Thank you." She started to leave again, but he spoke once more. "You make excellent coffee, Eleanor. It's a talent that's rarer than you might think." "It's just coffee," she said. "Nothing is just anything." He took another sip. "Everything we do reveals who we are. The care we take. The attention to detail. The pride in our work, however small that work might seem." His eyes found hers again. "You take pride in your coffee." Eleanor didn't know how to respond to that. In 3 years, exactly 0 customers had complimented her coffee as anything more than fine or good enough. Most didn't acknowledge her at all. "I should get back to work," she said. "Of course." This time, he let her go. Luca Moretti stayed for exactly 30 minutes. He drank his espresso slowly, made 2 phone calls in a language Eleanor didn't understand, and then stood with the same controlled grace he'd shown entering. He left a $100 bill on the table for a $5 coffee and walked out without looking back. Eleanor stared at the money for a long moment before picking it up. "Santa Maria," Maria breathed, emerging from the back. "He tipped you $100? "Apparently." "Eleanor, that's—" Maria shook her head. "That's not normal. Men like him don't tip waitresses $100 unless they want something." "It's just money, Maria." But even as she said it, Eleanor felt the weight of those smoke-colored eyes on her, and she wondered what exactly Luca Moretti had seen when he looked at her. What had made her worth noticing after 3 years of being invisible? She slipped the $100 bill into her apron pocket and tried to forget the encounter. She failed. 3 days later, Eleanor's bracelet went missing. She didn't notice immediately. She'd been rushing through her morning routine, already running late for her early shift. But when she reached for it on her nightstand that evening, it was gone. Her heart stopped. The bracelet was all she had left of her grandmother, the woman who'd taken her in after her parents died and loved her fiercely for 3 years before cancer stole her away too. It was delicate silver with a small charm in the shape of a bird, and her grandmother had told her it represented freedom, the freedom to choose your own path, to fly wherever your heart led you. Eleanor tore apart her tiny studio apartment, searching everywhere. Under the bed, in the laundry, through every drawer and pocket. Nothing. Then she remembered. She'd worn it to work yesterday. She'd been wiping down tables in the late afternoon when she felt it loosen on her wrist. She must have taken it off and set it down somewhere, planning to put it back on after her shift. She must have forgotten. Panic clawed at her throat. The cafe had been busy yesterday. Dozens of people in and out. Anyone could have taken it. It could be gone forever. She barely slept that night, and when her alarm went off at 5 a.m., she was already dressed and out the door, racing to the cafe before it opened. She had to find it. She had to. The cafe was still dark when she arrived, but Marco, the morning baker, let her in through the back entrance. "You're here early," he said, surprised. "I lost something. Can I look around?" Sure. You okay? You look... I'm fine." "Thanks, Marco." She wasn't fine. She was desperate. She searched every surface, checked the lost and found box, looked under tables and chairs. Nothing. The bracelet was gone. Eleanor felt something crack inside her chest. It was just a bracelet, just a piece of metal and sentiment. But it was also the last physical connection to the only person who'd ever made her feel like she mattered. And now it was gone, because she'd been careless, because she'd been too busy being invisible to pay attention to the one thing that made her feel seen. She was sitting at a table with her head in her hands when the bell above the door chimed. She looked up, expecting Marco. Instead, she saw Luca Moretti. He was alone this time, without his guards, wearing dark jeans and a black sweater that made him look less like a businessman and more like a predator. He stopped when he saw her, his expression unreadable. "We're not open yet," Eleanor said automatically. "I know." He walked toward her table with that same controlled grace. "I came to return something." He reached into his pocket and pulled out her bracelet. Eleanor's breath caught. "How did you... You left it on the counter 3 days ago. I found it after you'd gone." He held it out to her. It seemed important. She took it from him with shaking hands, cradling it like something precious and fragile. "Thank you. I thought it was gone. I thought..." Her voice cracked. "It belonged to someone you loved." It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. "My grandmother. It's all I have left of her." Luca was quiet for a moment, watching her with those calculating eyes. Then he pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "Tell me about her." "What?" "Your grandmother. Tell me about her." Eleanor didn't understand why this powerful, dangerous man wanted to hear about her grandmother, but something in his expression, a flicker of genuine interest maybe, or understanding, made her speak. "She took me in when I was 8, after my parents died." The words came slowly at first, then faster. "She was tough. She didn't take crap from anyone, but she loved me. Really loved me. Not because she had to, but because she chose to." Eleanor looked down at the bracelet. "She gave me this before she died. Told me I was free to be whoever I wanted to be. That I didn't have to be invisible just because the world wanted to overlook me." "But you became invisible anyway." Eleanor's eyes snapped up. "Excuse me? You're talented, intelligent, and stronger than you realize. Yet you work in a cafe, blending into the background, letting people look through you." Luca leaned forward slightly. "Why? You don't know anything about me. I know you make coffee with the precision of an artist. I know you move through this cafe like you're apologizing for existing. I know you've spent years making yourself small." His eyes held hers. "I know what it looks like when someone is hiding from the world. The question is why?" Eleanor felt exposed, like he'd stripped away every defense she'd built. "Maybe I'm not hiding. Maybe this is just who I am." "No," Luca said quietly. "This is who you've decided to be. There's a difference." Before Eleanor could respond, the back door opened and Marco called out, "Eleanor, you still here?" Luca stood smoothly. "I should go." "Wait." Eleanor stood too, clutching the bracelet. "Thank you for bringing this back. You didn't have to." "Yes, I did." He started toward the door, then paused. "Eleanor." "Yes?" I'm hosting a private event at my home tomorrow evening. I need someone to prepare coffee for my guests. Someone skilled. His gaze held hers. I'd like to hire you. Eleanor's heart stuttered. I don't think the pay is $500 for 3 hours of work. You'd simply make coffee. Nothing more. $500. That was more than she made in 2 weeks at the cafe. I don't understand. Why me? Because you make excellent coffee, and because... He tilted his head, studying her. Because I think you're tired of being invisible. This is a chance to be seen. He pulled out a card and set it on the table between them. Heavy black cardstock with silver lettering, an address, a time, nothing else. The choice is yours, Eleanor. You can stay here, stay safe, stay small. Or you can take a risk. His eyes glinted with something that might have been challenge. What will it be? He walked out before she could answer, leaving her standing in the empty cafe with a business card in one hand and her grandmother's bracelet in the other. Marco emerged from the back, eyeing the card suspiciously. What was that about? Eleanor stared at the address. She recognized it, an exclusive neighborhood on the north side of the city where old money and new power intersected. The kind of place she'd never belonged. Eleanor? I don't know, she said honestly. But that was a lie. She knew exactly what it was about. Luca Moretti had looked at her and seen something worth noticing. After years of being invisible, someone had finally seen her. The question was whether being seen by a man like him was a gift or a curse. Eleanor stood outside the wrought iron gates of Luca Moretti's mansion the following evening, second-guessing every decision that had led her here. The estate loomed before her like something from another world, all stone columns and arched windows surrounded by manicured gardens that probably required a full-time staff to maintain. Lights glowed from within, warm and inviting, but Eleanor felt only cold dread settling in her stomach. She'd almost talked herself out of coming at least a dozen times. $500 wasn't worth walking into danger. Except $500 meant she could pay off the medical bill that had been haunting her for 6 months. $500 meant she could eat something other than ramen for a month. $500 meant she could breathe a little easier. And maybe, just maybe, it meant she could prove her grandmother right. That she didn't have to stay invisible. That she could be someone worth noticing. She pressed the intercom button before she could change her mind. Yes? A woman's voice, crisp and professional. Eleanor Bennett, I'm here to... The gate swung open before she finished. Apparently she was expected. The driveway curved through the gardens, and Eleanor walked it slowly, taking in the wealth that surrounded her. Stone fountains, ancient trees, sculptures that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. This wasn't just money, this was power, old and entrenched and utterly foreign to everything she knew. The front door opened as she approached, and a woman in her 50s greeted her with a professional smile. Miss Bennett, please, come in. Mr. Moretti is expecting you. Eleanor stepped into a foyer that could have swallowed her entire studio apartment. Marble floors reflected light from a chandelier that dripped crystal. A curved staircase swept upward to the second floor. Artwork that belonged in museums hung on the walls. This way, please. The woman led her through corridors lined with more art, more evidence of wealth that Eleanor couldn't fathom. They passed rooms with soaring ceilings and furniture that looked antique and priceless. Eleanor caught glimpses of men in dark suits, more guards, she realized, stationed at strategic points throughout the house. Finally, they reached a kitchen that was larger than most restaurants, all gleaming stainless steel and professional-grade equipment. Everything you'll need is here, the woman said. Espresso machine, grinder, cups, beans. Mr. Moretti prefers a strong dark roast, but his guests will have varying preferences. You'll prepare coffee as requested and bring it to the salon. She gestured to a door at the far end of the kitchen. That leads directly there. Any questions? How many guests? Approximately 15. The event begins in 30 minutes. The woman's expression softened slightly. Don't be nervous, Miss Bennett. Mr. Moretti wouldn't have hired you if he didn't trust your abilities. Trust. Eleanor almost laughed. Luca Moretti didn't trust her. He'd simply recognized something in her that he could use. The woman left, and Eleanor was alone in the vast kitchen. She took a breath and approached the espresso machine, a top-of-the-line model that probably cost more than her car. She familiarized herself with the equipment, tested the grinder, examined the selection of beans. Everything was perfect, professional, exactly what she needed. She could do this. She'd made thousands of cups of coffee. This was just coffee. Except it wasn't just coffee, and she knew it. 30 minutes later, the woman returned. "They're ready for you." Eleanor had prepared a tray with espresso cups, sugar, and cream, along with a carafe of her best dark roast. She lifted it carefully and followed the woman through the door into the salon. The room was stunning, all dark wood paneling and leather furniture, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the gardens. But Eleanor barely noticed the decor. Her attention fixed on the men gathered there, 15 of them, exactly as promised, all in expensive suits, all watching her enter with expressions ranging from curious to calculating. And at the center of it all, Luca Moretti, seated in a high-backed chair like a king holding court. His eyes met hers across the room, and she saw the flicker of approval. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice cutting through the low conversation, "our coffee has arrived." Eleanor moved through the room, pouring coffee with hands that remained steady through sheer force of will. The men largely ignored her. She was staff, invisible again, which should have been comforting but somehow felt worse in this setting. She was hyper-aware of every sound, the clink of cups, the low rumble of conversation in multiple languages, the scratch of pen on paper as deals were made and territories divided. This wasn't a business meeting. This was something darker, more dangerous. These were men who operated outside the law, who built empires on loyalty and fear, and she was serving them coffee. She was refilling Luca's cup when one of the men spoke in English, his accent thick. "Moretti, where did you find this one? She's prettier than the last." Eleanor's hand didn't shake, but something cold slithered down her spine. Luca's expression didn't change, but his voice went arctic. "She's here to serve coffee, Dante. Nothing more." Of course, of course." Dante leaned back in his chair, smirking. "I meant no disrespect." Eleanor finished pouring and stepped back, but Luca's voice stopped her. "Eleanor," she turned. "Yes?" "Bring me another cup in 10 minutes. I prefer it fresh." It was a dismissal and a protection all at once. She nodded and retreated to the kitchen, her heart racing. She spent the next 2 hours in a strange rhythm, preparing coffee, bringing it to the salon, retreating to the kitchen. The men's conversation rose and fell, sometimes heated, sometimes coldly controlled. She caught fragments in English, shipments, territories, problems that needed solving. Each fragment confirmed what she'd suspected. Luca Moretti wasn't just wealthy. He was dangerous. Finally, the meeting ended. The men filed out in groups of 2 and 3, their bodyguards materializing from the shadows to escort them. Eleanor began cleaning up the salon, collecting cups and wiping down surfaces, trying to make herself invisible again. "Leave it." She turned to find Luca standing in the doorway, watching her. The other men were gone. They were alone. "The staff will handle it," he continued, walking into the room. "You did well tonight. It was just coffee. We've already established that nothing is just anything." He moved to the window, looking out over the darkened gardens. "You weren't afraid. Should I have been? Most people are, when they see what you saw tonight, when they understand what kind of men were in this room." He turned to face her. "But you kept your hands steady. You didn't flinch. You didn't ask questions. Would you have answered them?" A slight smile touched his lips. "No." Eleanor set down the tray she'd been holding. "Can I ask one now?" "You can ask. I may not answer." "Why did you really hire me? It wasn't because of my coffee." Luca was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those calculating eyes. "You remind me of someone," he said finally. "Someone who refused to stay invisible even when the world demanded it. Someone who took pride in small things because she understood that small things matter." His expression shifted, becoming something harder. "She's dead now. Has been for 3 years." The pain in his voice was so unexpected, so raw, that Eleanor forgot to be afraid. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. She made her choices. They led to consequences." He moved away from the window, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out an envelope and held it out to her. "Your payment, plus extra for your discretion." Eleanor took the envelope. It was thicker than she'd expected. "There's $1,000 there," Luca said. "500 for tonight. 500 for forgetting everything you saw and heard." "I can't." You can, and you will. His voice carried the weight of command. What you witnessed tonight can never be discussed. Not with friends, not with family, not with police. Do you understand? Eleanor's mouth went dry. Are you threatening me? I'm protecting you. Knowledge is dangerous in my world, Eleanor. The less you know, the safer you are. He stepped closer, and she fought the urge to step back. But I need to know that you understand the rules. What happens in this house stays in this house. Always. I understand. Good. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was surprisingly gentle from a man who commanded such violence. I'd like to hire you again. Next week, same time, same arrangement. Are you interested? Eleanor should have said no. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to take the money and never come back, to return to her invisible life where she was safe if unfulfilled. But she looked into Luca Moretti's eyes and saw something that terrified her more than his power or his danger. She saw someone who understood loneliness, who knew what it meant to wear a mask so long you forgot there was a face beneath it. Yes, she heard herself say. I'm interested. His smile was slow and dangerous. Then I'll see you next week, Eleanor Bennett. He walked her to the door himself, another small gesture that felt significant in ways she didn't understand. As she stepped out into the night, he called after her. Eleanor, she turned back. Your grandmother was right. You're not meant to be invisible. The question is what you're going to do about it. The door closed before she could respond, leaving her standing in the darkness with $1,000 in her hand and the feeling that she'd just crossed a line she could never uncross. She walked home through the quiet streets, her mind spinning. She thought about the men in that salon, about the power they wielded, about the danger that clung to them like smoke. She thought about Luca Moretti, about the coldness in his eyes and the unexpected gentleness in his touch, about the woman he'd mentioned, the one who'd refused to stay invisible, about the fact that she was dead. Eleanor clutched the envelope tighter and wondered what price she'd ultimately pay for choosing to be seen. But even as fear whispered warnings in her mind, something else stirred in her chest, something that felt like hope, like possibility, like the first breath after years of suffocating. She thought of her grandmother's bracelet, warm against her wrist. She thought of the bird charm and what it represented, freedom, the freedom to choose your own path. She'd made her choice. Whatever came next, she would face it with her eyes open. Eleanor returned to Luca Moretti's mansion the following week, and the week after that, and the week after that. What began as a single night of serving coffee became a regular arrangement. Every Thursday evening, she would arrive at 7, prepare drinks for whoever gathered in that salon, and leave by 10 with an envelope that made her month's rent feel manageable for the first time in years. She told Maria she'd picked up catering work. She told herself it was just a job. Both were lies she needed to believe. The truth was more complicated. The truth was that every Thursday she stepped into a world that should have terrified her, but instead made her feel more alive than she had in years. She learned to read the room's temperature by the way Luca's jaw tightened or relaxed. She learned which men preferred their espresso with a twist of lemon and which ones drank it black and bitter. She learned to move through conversations in multiple languages, understanding nothing and everything all at once. And she learned that Luca Moretti watched her more than he should. It was subtle at first, a glance that lingered a second too long. The way his attention would shift to her even when he was deep in conversation with dangerous men about dangerous things. How he always requested that she bring his coffee personally, even though any of his staff could have done it. She told herself it meant nothing. He was her employer, nothing more. The fact that her heart raced every time their fingers brushed during an exchange was irrelevant. The fact that she found herself thinking about him during her shifts at the cafe, wondering what he was doing, who he was with, whether he ever thought about her, all of it was foolish and dangerous and had to stop. It didn't stop. 6 weeks after that first night, everything changed. Eleanor arrived at the mansion to find it unusually quiet. No cars lined the circular driveway. No guards flanked the entrance. Just the housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, waiting at the door with an expression Eleanor couldn't read. Is the event canceled? Eleanor asked, confused. There is no event tonight. Mrs. Chen stepped aside. Mr. Moretti requested your presence for a different purpose. Please, follow me. Warning bells screamed in Eleanor's mind, but she followed Mrs. Chen through the familiar corridors to an unfamiliar destination, a study she'd never seen before. Dark wood shelves lined the walls, filled with books in multiple languages. A massive desk dominated one corner, its surface covered with papers and a laptop. And standing by the window, silhouetted against the city lights, was Luca. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen," he said without turning. "That will be all." The door clicked shut behind Eleanor, and suddenly the room felt too small, too intimate. This wasn't the salon where 15 men gathered to discuss their empires. This was personal space, and she was alone in it with him. "You're probably wondering why I asked you here," Luca said, finally turning to face her. He looked different tonight, tired maybe, or troubled. The careful control he usually wore like armor seemed slightly cracked. The thought crossed my mind. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I like that about you. You don't pretend to be comfortable when you're not. You don't perform false ease." He moved to his desk, poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. "Whiskey? I don't drink." "Smart." He set one glass down and lifted the other to his lips. "I need to ask you something, Eleanor, and I need you to answer honestly." Her pulse quickened. "Okay. Why do you keep coming back here?" The question caught her off guard. "You pay me well." "I could pay someone else well. There are dozens of skilled baristas in this city. Yet you're the one I keep hiring." He took a slow sip of whiskey, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're intelligent enough to know what you see here every Thursday. You understand the kind of men who walk through these doors. You've heard enough to piece together what I am, what I do. So why do you keep coming back?" Eleanor's mouth went dry. This felt like a test, but she didn't know what answer he wanted. "I told you. The money, is that really all?" He set down his glass and moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and dark. "Because I've watched you these past weeks, Eleanor. I've seen the way you move through this house. You're not afraid. You should be, but you're not. Why?" "Maybe I'm stupid." "You're many things. Stupid isn't one of them." He reached out slowly, giving her time to step back, and tilted her chin up with one finger. The touch sent electricity through her skin. "I think you come back because you're tired of being invisible. Because when you're here, you feel seen, acknowledged, real." His thumb brushed along her jaw. "Am I wrong?" Eleanor's breath caught. She should pull away, should maintain professional distance, should remember that this man was dangerous, and that whatever was happening between them could only end badly. Instead, she told him the truth. "No, you're not wrong." Something flickered in his eyes. Triumph, maybe, or hunger. His hand dropped away, but he didn't step back. "I have a proposition for you." "Another one?" "I need someone I can trust. Someone who exists outside my usual circles. Someone who can move through my world without being part of it." He paused. "I'd like to hire you as my personal barista. You'd come here 3 times a week, not just for events, but whenever I need you. The pay would be $1,500 a week." Eleanor's mind reeled. $1,500 a week was more than she made in a month at the cafe. It was security, stability, everything she'd been fighting for. It was also a trap. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because you see me." The words were quiet, almost vulnerable. "Everyone else in my life sees the name, the power, the fear I inspire. You see past it. You look at me like I'm just a man." He moved closer still until only inches separated them. "Do you have any idea how rare that is?" Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. "Luca, I'm not asking you to think. I'm asking you to choose." His hand came up to cup her cheek, and this time she didn't pull away. "Stay invisible in your cafe, serving people who never see you, or step into this world with me. Be seen, be valued, be more than you've allowed yourself to be." "This is crazy," she breathed. "Yes." His thumb traced her lower lip. "Does that mean no?" She should say yes, should walk away from this dangerous man and his dangerous world, should choose safety over the terrifying pull she felt toward him. But safety had never made her feel alive. "I'll need to give the cafe 2 weeks' notice," she heard herself say. Luca's smile was slow and devastating. You'll start tomorrow." He kissed her then, not rushed or demanding, but deliberate and thorough, like he was claiming something that had always been his. Eleanor melted into it, into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as the world narrowed to the taste of whiskey on his tongue and the strength of his arms around her. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Luca rested his forehead against hers. "This is a mistake," he murmured. "Probably. I can't offer you a normal life, Eleanor. I can't promise you safety or stability or any of the things you deserve. I'm not asking for promises. You should be." He pulled back to look at her, his expression serious. "I'm not a good man. The things I've done, the empire I've built, it's all built on choices most people would call monstrous. Being close to me puts a target on your back. Do you understand that?" Eleanor thought about her grandmother, about the bracelet on her wrist, about freedom and choice. "I understand. And you still want this?" "I still want this." He studied her for a long moment, as if trying to memorize her face. Then he stepped back, putting professional distance between them again. "Mrs. Chen will give you a schedule. You'll have access to the house, to my private kitchen. If you need anything, ask. If you're ever uncomfortable, tell me. And Eleanor?" "Yes?" "What happens between us stays between us. No one can know. It would make you a weakness, and my enemies would exploit that." His jaw tightened. "I won't let that happen." Eleanor nodded, even as a chill ran through her. She was stepping into a world where showing emotion was dangerous, where caring about someone made them a liability. A world where men like Luca built walls around their hearts, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. A world she was choosing anyway. Over the next month, Eleanor's life transformed in ways she couldn't have imagined. She quit the cafe, ignoring Maria's worried questions and her own nagging doubts. She began spending 3 evenings a week at Luca's mansion, arriving in the late afternoon to prepare his coffee and staying sometimes until midnight, learning the rhythms of his world. She discovered he was an insomniac who worked until 3 in the morning, that he spoke 4 languages fluently and could read 2 more, that he had a scar on his ribs from a knife fight when he was 19 and another on his shoulder from a bullet that had come too close, that he read philosophy, Marcus Aurelius, Machiavelli, Sun Tzu, and could quote them from memory. She learned that the man the world saw was only one version of Luca Moretti. In private, away from his soldiers and his enemies, he was something else entirely. Still guarded, still controlled, but capable of moments of unexpected gentleness. The way he'd thank her for coffee with genuine appreciation. How he'd ask about her day and actually listen to the answer. The rare smiles that transformed his face from austere to almost beautiful. They didn't kiss again, though the tension between them built like a storm waiting to break. Luca maintained careful distance, never touching her unless absolutely necessary, always professional even when his eyes betrayed everything he wasn't saying. Eleanor told herself it was better this way, that keeping things professional would protect her heart, that she could work for him without falling for him. She was lying to herself again. It was a Tuesday evening in late November when the first crack appeared in their careful facade. Eleanor was in the kitchen preparing a tray when raised voices echoed from Luca's study. She froze, her instinct warning her to stay out of it, but the anger in those voices made her skin prickle with unease. "You're making a mistake, Luca." The voice was unfamiliar, harsh with frustration. "Showing mercy now will be seen as weakness." "I don't recall asking for your opinion, Vincent." Luca's voice was cold, controlled. "The decision is made. The family won't stand for it. You let Caruso walk away, and others will think they can cross you without consequence. Caruso made a mistake. He's corrected it. There's no reason to kill a man who's proven his loyalty through action." "His loyalty?" Vincent's laugh was ugly. "He stole from you, from us, and you're going to let him live because he apologized?" "I'm letting him live because killing him would start a war we don't need." Luca's patience was clearly wearing thin. "We have bigger threats to worry about. The Castellanos are moving into our territory. The feds are sniffing around our shipping operations. I'm not wasting resources on revenge when we need to focus on survival." "Your father would have—" "My father is dead." The words cracked like a whip. "I lead this family now, my decisions, my consequences. If you can't accept that, the door is behind you." Silence. Then footsteps and a door slamming. Eleanor stood frozen in the kitchen, the tray forgotten in her hands. She shouldn't have heard that. Shouldn't know that Luca had enemies within his own organization, that his authority was being questioned, that the empire he controlled was more fragile than it appeared. She was setting down the tray when Luca appeared in the doorway. He looked exhausted, his shoulders tight with tension, his expression harder than she'd ever seen it. "How much did you hear?" he asked quietly. "Enough to know you probably need coffee more than usual." A muscle in his jaw twitched. "I need you to forget what you heard." "Already forgotten." He moved into the kitchen, and Eleanor could feel the anger rolling off him in waves. She'd never seen him like this, barely controlled, edges sharp enough to cut. She poured his espresso with steady hands and held it out to him. He took it, but instead of drinking, he just stood there holding the cup, staring at nothing. "Are you okay?" Eleanor asked softly. "I'm fine." "Luca," I said, "I'm fine." The sharpness in his voice made her flinch, and immediately his expression shifted to something like regret. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have snapped at you." "It's okay. You're clearly dealing with something. Always." He set down the cup and scrubbed a hand over his face. "Do you know what it's like, Eleanor? To carry the weight of hundreds of lives? To make decisions where every option leads to blood, and you just have to choose which blood you can live with?" Eleanor moved closer, drawn by the raw pain in his voice. "No, I don't know what that's like." "Vincent's right about one thing. My father would have killed Caruso without hesitation. My father believed in absolute power, absolute control. You betray the family, you die. Simple. Clean." Luca's laugh was bitter. "But I'm not my father. I can't be him, no matter how much easier it would make things." "Why not?" "Because I've seen where that path leads. I watched my father become something monstrous in the name of strength. I watched him destroy everything soft in himself until there was nothing left but ice and cruelty." He looked at her then, and the vulnerability in his eyes stole her breath. "I don't want to become that, but I don't know if I have a choice." Eleanor reached out before she could stop herself, placing her hand over his. "There's always a choice. Not in my world. Then maybe you need to change your world." Luca stared at her, and something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or hope, or fear. "You make it sound simple." "I didn't say it was simple. I said it was a choice." He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. The gesture was intimate, more intimate than their kiss had been, because it felt like connection rather than desire. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Make me believe things could be different." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Make me want things I have no right to want." Eleanor's heart was racing again, but this felt different from before. This felt like standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying and inevitable. "What do you want, Luca?" He pulled her closer, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. "Things I can't have. Things that would put you in danger. Things that make me weak." "I'm not afraid of danger." "You should be." But even as he said it, his other hand came up to cradle her face. "You should run from me, Eleanor. You should go back to your invisible life and forget you ever walked into my world." "Is that what you want?" "What I want doesn't matter. It matters to me." Something broke in his expression then, and he kissed her with an urgency that made their first kiss seem tame. It was desperate and claiming and full of everything he wouldn't say, all the loneliness and longing and fear that he kept locked behind his controlled exterior. Eleanor kissed him back with equal desperation, her hands in his hair, her body pressed against his. She tasted his need, his hunger, his carefully hidden vulnerability, and she offered her own in return. For those few moments, they weren't a crime boss and a barista. They were just two people tired of being alone. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Luca rested his forehead against hers. "This is dangerous," he murmured. "I know. We can't. This can't happen again." "I know." But they both knew that was a lie. Whatever was between them had already gone beyond employer and employee, beyond attraction, beyond anything either of them could control. They'd crossed too many lines, shared too many truths, seen too much of each other's hidden selves to go back now. "I should go," Eleanor whispered, even though leaving was the last thing she wanted. Luca's arms tightened around her. "Stay, just for a few more minutes." So she stayed, wrapped in his arms in the quiet kitchen, while outside his world continued turning with all its violence and danger and impossible choices. She stayed because he needed her to, because she needed it too, because in that moment they were each other's only refuge from the loneliness that had haunted them both for so long. Finally, reluctantly, Luca released her. "I'll have someone drive you home." "I can take the bus, Eleanor." His tone left no room for argument. "It's late. My driver will take you, please." She nodded, recognizing this for what it was. Not control, but protection. His way of keeping her safe in a world where safety was a luxury he rarely afforded anyone. As she gathered her things, Luca caught her hand one more time. "Eleanor, what Vincent said earlier about Caruso. Already forgotten," she said again. "I meant it." Relief flickered across his face. "Thank you." "You don't have to thank me for keeping your secrets, Luca. That's part of this. Part of us." The word us hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Luca's jaw tightened. "There is no us. There can't be." "Then what is this?" "A mistake I keep making." But his thumb traced along her knuckles, gentle and possessive all at once. "A mistake I can't seem to stop making." Eleanor pulled her hand away, needing the distance to think clearly. "I should go." "Yes, you should." But as she walked toward the door, his voice stopped her one more time. "Eleanor, be careful. The world I live in, people notice things. If anyone suspects that you mean something to me, they'll use you to get to me. Do you understand?" She turned back to look at him, this powerful man who commanded so much yet seemed so vulnerable in this moment. "I understand. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because of me." The raw honesty in those words made her chest ache. "Nothing's going to happen to me. You can't promise that. Neither can you, but we're here anyway." A sad smile touched his lips. "Yes, we're here anyway." The driver took her home in silence, and Eleanor spent the whole ride replaying every moment, every word, every touch. She was in over her head. She knew it. This thing with Luca was dangerous and complicated and had no good ending. But she also knew she wasn't walking away, couldn't walk away. Because for the first time in her life, someone saw her, really saw her, and wanted her anyway. Not the invisible waitress, not the girl who'd learned to make herself small, but Eleanor, with all her sharp edges and hidden dreams and stubborn refusal to stay in the shadows. Luca Moretti had looked at her and seen someone worth keeping secrets for, worth breaking his own rules for, worth the risk. And she'd looked at him and seen past the cold exterior to the man underneath, the one who chose mercy when he could have chosen violence, who carried the weight of impossible decisions, who was trying desperately not to become the monster his world demanded. They were both fools, but they were fools together. Over the following weeks, their relationship evolved into something neither of them could name. They didn't kiss again. Luca maintained that boundary with iron discipline, but the intimacy between them deepened in other ways. Late-night conversations over coffee where he told her about the philosophy books he read and she told him about the degree in education she'd abandoned when money ran out. Moments of comfortable silence where they could simply exist together without performance or pretense. His hand on the small of her back as he guided her through the house, her fingers adjusting his collar before he left for a meeting. Small touches. Careful words. Everything they couldn't say expressed in the spaces between. Eleanor learned to read his moods with uncanny accuracy. She knew when meetings had gone badly by the tension in his shoulders. She knew when he was worried by the way he'd drink his espresso in 3 quick swallows instead of savoring it. She knew when he was thinking about his father by the haunted look in his eyes. And Luca learned her just as thoroughly. He noticed when she was tired and would send her home early. He noticed when she was stressed about bills and quietly doubled her pay without explanation. He noticed when she wore her grandmother's bracelet and understood she was drawing strength from the past. They were building something neither of them had intended, something dangerous and fragile and undeniable. It couldn't last. They both knew it. But they held on to it anyway, stealing moments of connection in a world that would destroy them for caring. The storm they'd been ignoring finally broke on a Friday evening in early December, when Eleanor arrived at the mansion to find it in controlled chaos. Men moved through the corridors with weapons barely concealed, their faces tight with tension. Mrs. Chen intercepted Eleanor at the door, her usual composure fractured. Miss Bennet, perhaps you should come back another time. What's happening? There's been an incident. Mr. Moretti is handling it, but… Eleanor! Luca's voice cut through the chaos. He appeared at the top of the stairs, his shirt sleeves rolled up, a smear of what looked like blood on his collar. Come with me. Now. The command in his voice left no room for argument. Eleanor followed him up the stairs and down a hallway she'd never been in before, her heart hammering as the sounds of urgent conversation and ringing phones faded behind them. He led her into what appeared to be a private office, smaller and more austere than his study, and locked the door behind them. Luca, what's going on? He moved to the window, looking out over the grounds where more armed men patrolled. The Castellanos hit one of our shipments tonight. 3 of my men are dead. 2 more are in the hospital. His voice was eerily calm, but Eleanor could see the fury coiled in every line of his body. They're sending a message. What kind of message? That they think I'm weak, that choosing negotiation over violence makes me vulnerable. He turned to face her, and the coldness in his eyes made her breath catch. They're wrong. Eleanor had never seen him like this, balanced on the knife's edge between control and rage, his careful mask slipping to reveal the dangerous man beneath. What are you going to do? What I have to do. He moved toward his desk, pulled out a drawer, and removed a handgun. The casual way he checked the magazine and chambered around made Eleanor's stomach drop. I'm going to remind them why they should fear the Moretti name. You're going to kill them. Yes. No hesitation, no regret. Just cold certainty. Eleanor's hands trembled. She'd known what Luca was, what he did, but seeing it, watching him prepare for violence with the same deliberate care he used for everything else, made it visceral and terrifying and real. There has to be another way. There isn't. He slipped the gun into a shoulder holster with practiced ease. They killed my people, Eleanor. If I don't respond, I might as well paint a target on every member of my organization. Mercy is only strength when it's backed by the credible threat of force. Without that, it's just weakness waiting to be exploited. So you're going to become exactly what you said you didn't want to be. Your father. The words hit him like a physical blow. His jaw tightened, and for a moment Eleanor thought she'd gone too far. Then his shoulders sagged, and he looked at her with something that might have been despair. I don't have a choice. Yes, you do. You always have a choice. Not in this world. Not when lives depend on me. He crossed to her, his hands coming up to frame her face. I brought you up here because I need you to understand something. What's about to happen? It's going to be ugly. It's going to be violent. And when it's over, you're going to see me differently. You're going to see what I really am. I already know what you are. No. You know the version of me that exists in this house, away from the blood and the violence. You know the man I am with you. His thumbs stroked along her cheekbones, achingly gentle. But that's not all of me, and I need you to decide right now if you can handle the rest. Eleanor's throat tightened. Are you asking me to leave? I'm giving you the chance to, before this goes any further, before you're in so deep that leaving becomes impossible. His eyes searched hers. Because once you know everything, once you've seen what I'm capable of, there's no going back to ignorance. You'll carry that knowledge forever. She should take the out he was offering, should walk away before she became complicit in whatever violence was coming, should choose safety over the terrifying connection that bound her to this dangerous man. But Eleanor had never been good at choosing the safe path. I'm not leaving, she said quietly. Eleanor, I said, I'm not leaving. She covered his hands with hers. Whatever happens tonight, whatever you have to do, it doesn't change what I see when I look at you. It should. Maybe, but it won't. She pulled his hands down but didn't let go. You think I don't understand the world you live in? I've watched you for months, Luca. I've seen the weight you carry. I've heard the decisions you make. I know that sometimes choosing between bad and worse is the only choice you get. Knowing and witnessing are different things. Then let me witness. Let me see all of you, not just the parts you think I can handle. She stepped closer until they were nearly touching. You told me once that I remind you of someone who refused to stay invisible. Well, I'm refusing right now. I'm refusing to let you push me away because you're afraid I can't handle your reality. Luca stared at her for a long moment, something raw and vulnerable flickering across his face. Then he pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her with almost crushing intensity. You're going to destroy me, he murmured against her hair. You're going to make me soft, make me weak, make me want things I can't have. Good, Eleanor whispered back. Maybe you need to be destroyed. Maybe we both do. They stood there, holding each other while chaos swirled around them, and Eleanor felt the shift between them like tectonic plates grinding together. This was the moment everything changed. The moment they stopped pretending this was just employer and employee, stopped pretending they could maintain professional distance, stopped pretending they weren't falling into something that would either save or ruin them both. A sharp knock at the door broke the moment. Boss, we need to move, Vincent's voice, urgent and impatient. Luca pulled back slowly, his hands lingering on her waist. Stay here. Don't leave this room until someone comes for you. How long will you be gone? I don't know. Hours. Maybe all night. He moved toward the door, then stopped and turned back. Eleanor, if something happens to me, don't. If something happens to me, he continued, his voice firm, there's an envelope in the bottom drawer of that desk. It has money, a phone number, instructions. Promise me you'll use it. Fear clawed at her throat. Nothing's going to happen to you. Promise me. I promise. He nodded once, then left, the door closing behind him with terrible finality. Eleanor stood frozen in the empty office, listening to footsteps and voices fading away, listening to cars starting and driving off, listening to the silence that followed. Then she sat down in his chair and waited. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Eleanor couldn't bring herself to leave the office, even though no one was stopping her. She sat in the dark, watching the city lights through the window, jumping at every sound. Mrs. Chen brought her tea at some point, her face carefully neutral, and told her that Mr. Moretti had called to say everything was proceeding as planned, whatever that meant. Eleanor tried not to imagine what proceeding as planned looked like, tried not to picture Luca in some warehouse or back alley, gun in hand, making the kind of choices that would haunt him even as he made them. Tried not to think about the men who died tonight, and the men who would die before morning. She failed at all of it. Around 2 a.m, she heard cars returning, doors slamming, voices in the corridors below. She stood at the window, watching as men emerged from black SUVs, their movements weary but alive. She counted them anxiously, looking for one particular figure. Then she saw him. Luca climbed out of the lead vehicle, and even from this distance, Eleanor could see he was different. His shoulders were tight, his movements economical and cold. There was blood on his hands and his shirt, and his face was a mask of stone. He looked exactly like what he was, a man who'd just committed violence and would do it again without hesitation if necessary. He looked like his father. Eleanor's hand pressed against the window, and as if sensing her gaze, Luca looked up. Their eyes met across the distance, and even through the glass and the darkness, she could see the question in his expression. Are you still here? After everything, are you still here? She nodded once, answering him. His shoulders sagged slightly, relief or resignation or both, and then he disappeared into the house. 20 minutes later, the office door opened. Luca stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway lights, and Eleanor's breath caught. Up close, the damage was more visible. Blood spattered his clothes and hands. His knuckles were split and bruising. There was a cut above his eye that someone had bandaged hastily. And his eyes were empty, hollowed out by whatever he'd done and seen. You should have left, he said, his voice rough. I told you I wouldn't. I killed 4 men tonight, Eleanor. Shot 3 of them myself. Watched the 4th bleed out while he begged for mercy I didn't give. He moved into the room like a wounded animal, dangerous and unpredictable. I'm exactly what you should be running from. Eleanor stood slowly, her heart breaking for the pain she could see beneath his anger. Then I guess I'm not very smart. This isn't a joke. I'm not joking. She moved toward him carefully. You did what you thought you had to do, what your position demanded. I don't have to like it to understand it. Understanding and accepting are different things. I know. She was close enough to touch him now, close enough to see the blood under his fingernails and the muscle jumping in his jaw. I'm not going to pretend this doesn't scare me, Luca. It does. But what scares me more is the thought of walking away from you. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you choose mercy when you can. I know you carry the weight of every decision. I know you hate what you have to be, even as you do it. Her hand came up to cup his cheek and he flinched but didn't pull away. I know you're more than the violence you commit. Am I? His voice cracked. Because right now, I don't feel like more. I feel like exactly what my father was. A killer. A monster. Your father wouldn't have cared about becoming a monster. He wouldn't have let it haunt him. Eleanor's thumb brushed along his cheekbone. You do. That's the difference. Luca's control shattered. He pulled her against him with desperate force, his hands tangling in her hair as he kissed her with an intensity that bordered on violence. It wasn't gentle or romantic. It was raw and aching and full of everything he couldn't say, all the fear and guilt and need that he'd been holding back for months. Eleanor kissed him back with equal desperation, tasting salt and copper and the bitterness of whiskey. She felt him trembling against her, this powerful man who commanded so much reduced to shaking in her arms. She held him tighter, offering what comfort she could, knowing it wasn't enough, but giving it anyway. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Luca rested his forehead against hers. I'm getting blood on you, he said hoarsely. I don't care. You should. But he didn't let her go. Eleanor, I need you to understand something. What I feel for you, it's dangerous. It makes me weak. It makes me hesitate when I should act, question when I should be certain. My enemies will see it. They'll use you to get to me. Then we'll be careful. Careful isn't enough in my world. One mistake, one moment of carelessness, and you could end up like... He stopped abruptly, pain flashing across his face. Like who? Eleanor asked softly. Like the woman you mentioned before? The one who died? Luca pulled back, putting distance between them. He moved to the window, staring out at the city he controlled through violence and fear. Her name was Sophia. She was my father's accountant's daughter. I met her when I was 23, just starting to understand what it meant to be a Moretti. His voice was flat, emotionless, but Eleanor could hear the pain underneath. She was brilliant, fierce. She refused to be intimidated by my name or my father's reputation. She saw me, really saw me the way you do. Eleanor's chest tightened. What happened to her? We tried to keep it secret, but nothing stays secret forever, not in this world. One of my father's rivals found out. They took her to get to me, to force my hand in a territorial dispute. His hands clenched into fists. They sent her back piece by piece over the course of a week, made sure I knew she was suffering, made sure I understood it was my fault for caring about her. Horror crawled up Eleanor's spine. Luca, my father wanted to use it, wanted to leverage her death to justify total war against the rival family. But I couldn't let her death be turned into just another move in his games. So I went after them myself, killed every single person involved in her kidnapping and murder. 17 men. Some of them begged, like the man tonight. I didn't care. Couldn't care. All I felt was empty. He turned to face her, and the anguish in his eyes stole her breath. That's when I understood what my father had been trying to teach me, that love is a weakness in our world, that caring about someone makes them a target, that the only way to survive is to become ice, to feel nothing. But you didn't, Eleanor whispered. You didn't become ice. You're still capable of feeling, of caring. I tried. For 3 years I tried. I threw myself into the business, made decisions that would have made my father proud, built walls around my heart so thick I thought nothing could break through them. A bitter smile touched his lips. Then you walked into that cafe with your invisible act and your perfect coffee and your grandmother's bracelet, and every wall I'd built started crumbling. Tears burned Eleanor's eyes. I'm not her, Luca. I'm not Sophia. I know. That's what terrifies me. He crossed back to her, his hands coming up to frame her face with heartbreaking gentleness. Because Sophia was strong, but she wasn't a survivor. You are. You've survived foster care and poverty, and a world that tried to make you invisible. You've got steel in your spine that she never had. And that makes you even more dangerous to me because I don't just care about you, I believe in you. I believe you could survive my world if I could just keep you safe long enough. Then keep me safe. We'll be smart about this. Careful. No one has to know. They'll know. His thumb caught a tear sliding down her cheek. Vincent already suspects. I've seen the way he looks at you when you're here. It's only a matter of time before others figure it out too. And when they do, you'll become a target. So what are you saying? That we can't do this? I'm saying we shouldn't. That the smart thing, the safe thing, would be for me to push you away before it's too late. His eyes held hers. But I'm also saying that I'm too selfish to do the smart thing, too weak to let you go. That's not weakness, Luca. That's being human. In my world, they're the same thing. Eleanor rose on her toes and kissed him softly, pouring everything she felt into the gentle press of her lips against his. When she pulled back, she saw something shift in his expression. Resignation, maybe, or surrender. Stay with me tonight, he said quietly. Just tonight. Let me pretend for a few hours that we're just two people instead of what we are. What are we? A disaster waiting to happen. But there was no heat in the words, only acceptance. Stay anyway? Yes. He led her through the quiet house to a bedroom she'd never seen before. It was surprisingly simple compared to the rest of the mansion. Just a large bed, some dark furniture, and windows that overlooked the gardens. Personal space, she realized. His sanctuary away from the empire he controlled. The bathroom's through there, he said, gesturing to a door. I need to wash this off. He looked down at his blood-stained hands with something like revulsion. I'll just be a few minutes. Eleanor nodded and sat on the edge of the bed while he disappeared into the bathroom. She heard water running, the sound of him moving around, and tried to process everything that had happened tonight. The violence, the revelations about Sophia, the raw vulnerability Luca had shown her. She should be terrified, should be planning her escape, should be calling someone, anyone, and getting as far from Luca Moretti as possible. Instead, she took off her shoes and waited for him to come back. When he emerged 15 minutes later, he'd showered and changed into clean clothes. The blood was gone, the physical evidence of violence washed away, but Eleanor could still see the weight of it in his eyes. He looked exhausted, hollowed out, older than his 34 years. You're still here, he said, as if he genuinely expected her to be gone. I told you I would be. He sat down beside her on the bed, maintaining a careful distance. I don't know how to do this, Eleanor. I don't know how to be with someone without putting them in danger, without turning them into a liability. Then we'll figure it out together. She reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together. One day at a time. What if one day isn't enough? What if they come for you the way they came for Sophia? Then you'll do what you do. You'll protect the people you care about with everything you have. She squeezed his hand. But we can't live in fear of what might happen, Luca. We can't let your past dictate our future. My past is always present in my world. I know, but so is your future. So am I. She shifted closer until their shoulders touched. I'm not asking you for promises or guarantees. I'm just asking you to let me stay. To let me see all of you, the good, the bad, the violent, the gentle, all of it. Luca was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. You're extraordinary, he said finally. Do you know that? Most people run from darkness. You walk straight into it. Maybe I'm just drawn to complicated men with blood on their hands and philosophy books on their shelves. A surprised laugh escaped him, rough and genuine. Is that what I am to you? Complicated? Among other things. She leaned her head against his shoulder. You're also stubborn, overprotective, and terrible at expressing emotion. But you're also brilliant, surprisingly kind when you think no one's looking, and you make me feel like I matter, like I'm not invisible anymore. His arm came around her shoulders, pulling her closer. You were never invisible, Eleanor. The world was just blind. They sat like that for a while, wrapped in each other and the quiet darkness of the room. Outside, the city continued its relentless turning, deals being made, violence being planned, empires rising and falling. But in this moment, in this space, they were just Eleanor and Luca, two damaged people finding unexpected solace in each other. I should let you sleep, Luca said eventually, though he made no move to leave. Stay, Eleanor said. Please. Eleanor, just stay. We don't have to do anything, just stay. He studied her face for a long moment, searching for something. Whatever he found there must have satisfied him because he nodded slowly. Okay, I'll stay. They lay down together, still fully clothed, Eleanor's head on his chest and his arms around her. His heartbeat was steady beneath her ear, solid and real and alive. She felt him gradually relax, the tension bleeding from his muscles as exhaustion finally caught up with him. Thank you, he murmured against her hair, for staying, for not running, for seeing me and staying anyway. Thank you for letting me, Eleanor whispered back. She felt him press a kiss to the top of her head, tender and devastating, and then his breathing deepened as sleep claimed him. Eleanor stayed awake a while longer, listening to him breathe, feeling the rise and fall of his chest, memorizing this moment when they were simply two people choosing each other despite all the reasons they shouldn't. She knew the morning would bring complications, questions about where they went from here, how they could make this work, what rules they'd have to follow to keep her safe. She knew Luca would probably try to push her away again, his fear for her safety warring with his need for connection. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, she had this: the weight of him beside her, the warmth of his arms around her, the quiet certainty that whatever happened next, they would face it together. Eleanor closed her eyes and let herself fall into sleep, safe in the arms of the most dangerous man she'd ever known, and somehow feeling more protected than she ever had in her life. When she woke, pale morning light was filtering through the windows and Luca was sitting on the edge of the bed, already dressed, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Morning," she said, her voice rough with sleep. "Morning." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture achingly gentle. "I need to go handle some things. The aftermath of last night. But I want you to stay here today. Rest. There's food in the kitchen, anything you need. Mrs. Chen knows you're here." Eleanor sat up, suddenly very aware of the shift in his demeanor. The vulnerability from last night was locked away again, replaced by the controlled mask he wore for the world. "Are you having regrets?" "About last night, no." His eyes held hers. "About bringing you into this world? Every day. But that doesn't change the fact that you're here now and I'm done pretending I want you to leave." "What does that mean?" "It means this is real. Whatever this is between us, it's real. And I'm going to do everything in my power to keep you safe while we figure out what it becomes." He leaned down and kissed her forehead. "But it also means you need to understand the rules. No one outside this house can know about us. Not your friends, not your family, no one. You can't come here more than you already do. We can't be seen together in public. And if I tell you to run, you run without questions. Understood?" "Luca." "Understood." His voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. "Understood." "Good." He stood, and she saw the weight settle back onto his shoulders. The responsibility, the danger, the empire he controlled. "I'll be back tonight. We'll talk more then." He left, and Eleanor was alone in his bedroom, surrounded by his scent and his silence and the morning light that made everything seem surreal. She should feel trapped, should feel like she'd made a terrible mistake. Instead, she felt oddly at peace. She'd chosen this. Chosen him. Chosen to step out of her invisible life into something dangerous and real and terrifyingly uncertain. And as she touched her grandmother's bracelet and thought about freedom and choice and the courage to fly wherever your heart led, Eleanor realized she had no regrets. Not yet, anyway. The weeks that followed existed in a strange duality. By day, Eleanor maintained the careful fiction of her normal life, running errands, reading in coffee shops, rebuilding the quiet routines she'd abandoned when she quit the cafe. By night, she slipped into Luca's world, moving through his mansion like a secret he kept hidden from everyone who might use her against him. They developed rituals that existed only in the spaces between his empire and her isolation. Late dinners in his private quarters when meetings ran long, early mornings when he'd find her already in the kitchen preparing his coffee before the rest of the house stirred. Stolen hours where they could pretend the outside world didn't exist, where he wasn't a man with blood on his hands, and she wasn't the weakness he couldn't afford. But pretending only worked for so long. Eleanor was leaving through the back entrance one Thursday evening when Vincent intercepted her. She'd seen him around the mansion countless times, always watching her with barely concealed suspicion, but he'd never approached her directly. Until now. "Miss Bennett?" His voice was cold, calculated. "A moment of your time." Eleanor's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression neutral. I was just leaving. This won't take long. He gestured toward a small sitting room off the main corridor. Not a request. She followed him inside, her mind racing through Luca's warnings about Vincent, about men who saw weakness as opportunity. The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded unnaturally loud in the quiet room. You've been coming here quite frequently, Vincent said, circling her slowly like a predator assessing prey. 3, sometimes 4 times a week. That's unusual for someone who's just preparing coffee. Mr. Moretti values consistency. Mr. Moretti values many things. Consistency, loyalty, discretion. He stopped in front of her, his eyes cold. What he doesn't value is distractions, particularly distractions that make him soft. Eleanor met his gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated. I don't know what you think is happening. I think you've managed to work your way into a position of influence. I think Luca looks at you the way he hasn't looked at anyone since Sophia died. And I think that makes you either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. But Vincent leaned closer. Which is it, Miss Bennett? I'm just here to do a job. Don't insult my intelligence. I've watched you two when you think no one's looking. I've seen the way he touches you, the way you look at him. Whatever this is, it's gone beyond professional. His voice dropped to something almost dangerous. And that's a problem. For who? For everyone. Luca's enemies are circling, looking for any sign of weakness they can exploit. His position isn't as secure as he wants to believe. Half the family still questions whether he's strong enough to lead, whether his reluctance to follow his father's methods makes him vulnerable. Vincent's jaw tightened. You make him vulnerable. You make him hesitate. You make him human when he needs to be a monster. Eleanor's hands clenched at her sides. Maybe being human isn't weakness. Maybe it's what separates him from the kind of monster his father was. His father built an empire that no one dared challenge. Luca is trying to maintain that empire with philosophy and mercy, and it's not working. The Castellanos sense blood in the water. They're pushing boundaries, testing limits, waiting for the moment when Luca's compassion costs him everything. Vincent's eyes bored into hers. And when that moment comes, when his enemies realize they can hurt him by hurting you, what do you think will happen? Luca won't let anything happen to me. That's exactly the problem. He'll make decisions based on protecting you instead of protecting the family. He'll sacrifice strategy for sentiment. He'll choose your safety over everyone else's survival. Vincent stepped back, his expression hardening. I've seen it before. Sophia made him weak, made him reckless. He went on a suicide mission to avenge her death, nearly got himself killed. We can't afford for that to happen again. Eleanor's throat tightened. What are you saying? I'm saying you need to end this. Whatever's happening between you and Luca, end it before it destroys him, before it destroys all of us. And if I don't? Vincent's smile was sharp and cold. Then I'll do what I have to do to protect this family, even if that means protecting Luca from himself. The threat hung in the air between them, ugly and undeniable. Eleanor felt ice slide down her spine, but she refused to show fear. Does Luca know you're threatening me? I'm not threatening you, Miss Bennett. I'm warning you. There's a difference. He moved toward the door, then paused. You seem like a decent person. You probably even care about him. If that's true, you'll walk away before your presence here gets people killed, before it gets you killed. He left, and Eleanor stood alone in the empty room, her heart hammering against her ribs. She wanted to dismiss Vincent's words as jealousy or power play politics, but she couldn't, because everything he'd said was true. She was Luca's weakness, and in his world, weakness got exploited. Eleanor didn't tell Luca about the conversation with Vincent. She told herself it was because she didn't want to create more tension between him and his second-in-command, but the truth was more complicated. Vincent's words had burrowed under her skin, planting seeds of doubt she couldn't quite uproot. What if she was making Luca vulnerable? What if her presence really did put everyone around him at risk? She tried to act normal when she saw him later that evening, but Luca read her too well. What's wrong? He asked as they sat in his study, the city lights spreading below them like a carpet of stars. Nothing, just tired. Eleanor. He set down his glass and turned to face her fully. Don't lie to me. What happened? She hesitated, then decided half-truths were safer than full ones. I've just been thinking about what you said, about how dangerous this is. About Sophia and what happened to her. Luca's expression shuddered. Vincent talked to you. It wasn't a question. Eleanor's silence was answer enough. What did he say? That I make you weak, that your enemies will use me against you, that I should leave before people get hurt. She met his eyes. Is he right? Vincent sees the world in black and white, strength and weakness, power and vulnerability. He doesn't understand that those things can coexist. Luca reached for her hand, his touch warm and grounding. Yes, caring about you makes me vulnerable in some ways, but it also gives me something to protect, something worth fighting for beyond territory and power. But what if he's right? What if I'm putting you in danger by being here? You're not putting me in danger. My life has always been dangerous. What you're doing is giving me a reason to survive it. His thumb traced circles on her palm. Vincent is afraid. He watched Sophia die, and he watched what it did to me. He doesn't want to see that happen again. But what he doesn't understand is that pushing you away won't make me safer. It'll just make me colder, harder, more like my father. Would that be so terrible if being like your father keeps you alive? Yes. The word was immediate and certain, because I've seen what that kind of life leads to. My father died alone in a hospital room, surrounded by people who feared him, but didn't love him. He had power and respect and absolute control, and none of it mattered in the end. He left nothing behind but an empire built on fear and a son who spent his whole life trying not to become him. Luca stood and moved to the window, his shoulders tight with tension. I don't want that life, Eleanor. I don't want to die alone, wondering if anyone will mourn me or if they'll just scramble to take my place. I don't want to be so cold that I can't feel anything anymore. I don't want to become the monster everyone expects me to be. Eleanor went to him, wrapping her arms around him from behind, her cheek pressed against his back. Then don't. Keep choosing differently. Keep choosing mercy when you can, even when it's hard. Keep being the man who reads philosophy at 3 in the morning and notices when I'm tired and brings me my grandmother's bracelet when I forget it. He turned in her arms, his hands coming up to frame her face. That's easy to say when it's just us. It's harder when those choices get people killed. I know, but the fact that it's hard doesn't mean it's wrong. She rose on her toes and kissed him softly. Vincent is afraid you'll lose yourself trying to protect me. I'm afraid you'll lose yourself trying to be what everyone else thinks you should be. Maybe we're both right. Maybe the only way through is to trust each other and hold on tight when things get bad. Luca's forehead dropped to rest against hers. Things are going to get bad, Eleanor. The Castellanos aren't backing down. They're planning something big. I can feel it. And when it happens, I need to know you'll be safe. How can you keep me safe when you're in the middle of a war? I'm working on that. He pulled back to look at her, something determined in his expression. I own a property on the Sicilian coast, an old villa that's been in my family for generations. It's remote, heavily secured, completely off anyone's radar. If things escalate here, I want you there. I want you somewhere they can't reach you. Fear and frustration warred in Eleanor's chest. You want to send me away. I want you alive. There's a difference. Luca, please. The word was quiet, almost broken. I can't go through that again. I can't watch someone I care about suffer because of me. If sending you away is what it takes to keep you safe, then that's what I'll do, even if you hate me for it. Eleanor saw the fear beneath his determination, the scars Sophia's death had left on his soul. She understood his need to protect her, even as it frustrated her. I won't hate you, but I won't hide either. If something happens, we face it together. That's not how this works. Then maybe we need to change how this works. She cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her gaze. I'm not Sophia, Luca. I'm not going to be a passive victim waiting to be saved or avenged. I'm choosing to be here, to be with you, knowing the risks. That has to mean something. It means you're braver than you should be. Or maybe it means I trust you to keep me safe without sending me away. She kissed him again, slower this time, trying to convey everything she felt. The fear and the trust and the stubborn refusal to give up on what they were building. We're stronger together than apart. Don't forget that. Luca kissed her back with something close to desperation, his hands tangling in her hair, His body pressed against hers like he could keep her safe through proximity alone. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers again. "Stay with me tonight," he murmured. "Let me pretend for a few more hours that the world isn't trying to tear us apart." Always. They spent the night wrapped in each other, talking until the early hours about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up in his father's shadow, about the expectations that had crushed him and shaped him in equal measure. She told him about her parents, about the accident that had stolen them and left her alone at 8 years old, about her grandmother who'd taught her that being small didn't mean being weak. They shared pieces of themselves they'd never given anyone else, building something fragile and precious in the darkness. And when they finally fell asleep just before dawn, Eleanor felt the weight of what they were creating, something real and deep and worth protecting, even as the world around them threatened to destroy it. The first true test came 3 days later. Eleanor was in Luca's kitchen preparing coffee when she heard shouting from the front of the house. Male voices, angry and aggressive. She moved toward the sound instinctively, then froze in the doorway when she saw the scene unfolding in the foyer. A man she didn't recognize stood surrounded by Luca's guards, his hands raised but his posture defiant. He was young, maybe mid-20s, with the kind of desperate energy that made him dangerous. Blood dripped from a cut on his lip, and his clothes were torn. And he was staring directly at Luca with murder in his eyes. "You killed my brother," the man spat. "Marco Castellano. You shot him 3 weeks ago in that warehouse, and now I'm here to return the favor." Luca stood 10 feet away, perfectly calm despite the gun one of his guards had trained on the intruder. "Your brother killed 3 of my men. He made his choice. I made mine. He was following orders. He was doing his job. So was I." Luca's voice was cold, emotionless. "This is how our world works, Marco. You know that. Your brother knew that. If you came here looking for revenge, you picked the wrong house." The man's laugh was bitter. "I didn't come here for revenge. I came here to deliver a message. From my uncle. From Antonio Castellano." Eleanor saw Luca's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "I'm listening." "He knows about her." The man's gaze flicked past Luca to where Eleanor stood frozen in the doorway. "The girl. The one you're hiding. The one you think you can protect by keeping her secret." His smile was ugly. "There are no secrets in our world, Moretti. You should know that by now." Ice flooded Eleanor's veins. She saw Luca's hands clench into fists, saw the careful control slip for just a moment to reveal the rage and fear underneath. "If Antonio wants to discuss terms, he can call me like a man instead of sending children to deliver threats." Luca's voice was deadly quiet. "Tell your uncle that if he or anyone in his organization comes near her, I will burn his empire to the ground. I will destroy everything he's built. I will make him watch as everyone he cares about suffers. And then when he's lost everything, I will kill him slowly enough that he begs for death. Do you understand?" The man's bravado faltered. "My uncle isn't afraid of you." "He should be, because the man who showed your brother mercy is dead. If Antonio pushes me, he'll discover exactly what I'm capable of when someone threatens what's mine." Luca took a step forward, and even Eleanor felt the menace rolling off him. "Now get out of my house before I demonstrate." The guards dragged the man out, his protests fading as they threw him past the gates. The moment he was gone, Luca's composure cracked. He turned to Eleanor, his face pale beneath the tan. "Pack your things. You're leaving, tonight." "Luca, wait." "There's no waiting. They know about you, which means you're not safe here anymore. Which means you're getting on a plane to Sicily in the next 3 hours." He was already moving toward his study, pulling out his phone. "I'll have guards with you around the clock. The villa is secure. You'll be safe there." Eleanor followed him, her heart racing. "I'm not running away while you fight a war." "You're not running. You're surviving. There's a difference." "No." The word came out stronger than she'd intended. "I told you I wouldn't hide, and I meant it. We face this together or not at all." Luca spun to face her, and the fear in his eyes stole her breath. "Do you have any idea what Antonio Castellano is capable of? What he'll do to you if he gets his hands on you? I've seen his work, Eleanor. I've seen what he does to people he wants to use as leverage. It's not quick. It's not clean. It's designed to break the people who care about the victim. Then we make sure he doesn't get his hands on me." The only way to ensure that is to get you as far from here as possible. Or we end this. We find a way to neutralize the threat instead of just hiding from it. Eleanor moved closer, placing her hands on his chest. You told me you're not your father. Prove it. Find a solution that doesn't involve violence or running. Find a different way. There is no different way. Not with men like Antonio. Then make one. You're brilliant, Luca. You've spent your whole life learning strategy and philosophy. Use it. Find leverage. Find a weakness. Find something other than sending me away and preparing for war. Luca stared at her for a long moment, conflict written across his face. Then he pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her with almost crushing force. I can't lose you, he whispered against her hair. I can't go through that again. It nearly destroyed me last time. If something happens to you because of me, it will destroy me. Do you understand that? I understand, but I'm not going anywhere. We're in this together, remember? She pulled back to look at him. Trust me. Trust us. We'll find a way through this. He searched her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, but you don't leave this house without armed guards. You don't go anywhere alone. And if I tell you to run, you run. No arguments. Deal? Deal. They spent the next hours in his study, Luca on the phone with various contacts, while Eleanor sat nearby, researching everything she could find about Antonio Castellano on Luca's laptop. What she discovered made her blood run cold. Antonio Castellano had built his empire on brutality and fear. Where Luca's father had at least paid lip service to honor and tradition, Antonio rejected all rules except power. He'd risen through the ranks by eliminating anyone who stood in his way, including his own brother when he'd questioned Antonio's methods. His reputation was built on the suffering of his enemies, on public displays of violence designed to terrify anyone who might challenge him, and now he'd set his sights on Luca. Why does he hate you so much? Eleanor asked during a brief lull in Luca's calls. Is it just territory? Partly, but it's also personal. Luca rubbed his eyes tiredly. Antonio and my father were rivals for years. They maintained an uneasy peace through mutual deterrence, both too powerful to destroy the other without massive casualties. When my father died and I took over, Antonio saw an opportunity. He thought I'd be weaker, easier to manipulate or eliminate. But you weren't. No, I've held my ground, maintained my father's alliances, even expanded some operations. That frustrates him. But what really enrages him is that I won't play his game. I won't engage in this kind of public brutality he uses to maintain fear. I choose strategic strikes over theatrical violence. I negotiate when I can instead of defaulting to war. To Antonio, that's weakness, and he's determined to prove it. By hurting me. By hurting you. Luca's jaw tightened. He knows I lost someone I cared about before. He knows how it affected me. He thinks history will repeat itself. He thinks threatening you will make me reckless, emotional, vulnerable. Will it? I don't know. The admission cost him. I want to be cold about this, strategic. I want to outmaneuver him, find his weaknesses, dismantle his operation piece by piece until he has no choice but to back down. But every time I think about him getting anywhere near you, all strategy vanishes. All I feel is rage and fear and the overwhelming need to protect you at any cost. Eleanor moved to stand between his legs as he sat in his desk chair. Her hands came up to frame his face, forcing him to meet her gaze. Then use that. Use the fact that he thinks he knows you. Let him believe you're emotional and reckless. And while he's preparing for the Luca who went on a suicide mission for Sofia, be the Luca who thinks 3 steps ahead. Surprise him. Something shifted in Luca's expression. Consideration, then calculation. You're saying I should use his assumptions against him. I'm saying he expects you to react like you did before. Don't give him what he expects. Give him something else entirely. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Luca's face. You're brilliant. Do you know that? I've been told I have my moments. He pulled her into his lap, his arms wrapping around her waist. Antonio thinks threatening you will make me weak. What if instead, it makes me appear stronger? What if I respond not with emotional retaliation, but with calculated, precise dismantling of his operations? What if I show him that threatening what's mine doesn't make me reckless? It makes me ruthless. Can you do that? Be ruthless without being your father? I think so. Because my father's ruthlessness was about ego and dominance. Mine would be about protection, about ensuring the people I care about stay safe. His eyes held hers. There's a difference. What did you have in mind? Over the next hour, Luca outlined a plan that was equal parts brilliant and terrifying. He wouldn't hide Eleanor or send her away. That would confirm Antonio's belief that she was a weakness to exploit. Instead, he would tighten security around her while simultaneously launching a coordinated attack on Antonio's most vulnerable operations. Financial holdings, shipping routes, political connections, everything Antonio had built would face pressure from multiple directions at once. But the real genius was in the message it sent. By refusing to hide Eleanor while simultaneously demonstrating his capability for strategic destruction, Luca would prove that caring about her didn't make him weak. It made him more dangerous, because now he had something worth fighting for beyond territory and power. It's risky, Eleanor said when he finished explaining. Antonio could escalate. He will escalate. That's inevitable. But if I do this right, his escalation will cost him more than it costs me. I'll force him into a position where continued aggression weakens his own organization. Eventually, his people will start questioning whether fighting me is worth the price. Luca's expression was grim. It won't be quick. It won't be clean. But it might end this without either of us having to die. When do you start? Tomorrow. I'll need to coordinate with my people, reach out to some contacts, set everything in motion. He stood, lifting Eleanor with him, and set her gently on her feet. But tonight, I need to ask you something. What? He took her hands in his expression serious. If this goes wrong, if despite everything I do, Antonio finds a way to get to you, I need you to promise me you'll use the information in that envelope I showed you, that you'll run and not look back, that you'll save yourself even if it means leaving me. Luca, promise me, Eleanor. I can face Antonio. I can face war. I can face anything except knowing that my failure to protect you cost you your life. Promise me you'll run if it comes to that. Eleanor wanted to argue, wanted to insist she'd never leave him, but she saw the fear in his eyes, the scars that Sophia's death had left, and she understood what he was really asking. He needed to know that this time would be different, that even if he failed, she would survive. I promise, she said quietly, but it won't come to that. We're going to win this together. I hope you're right. He kissed her then, slow and deep and full of everything he couldn't say. And Eleanor kissed him back, pouring every ounce of faith and love and stubborn hope into the connection between them. They would survive this. They had to. Because walking away from each other now would mean letting Antonio win, would mean proving that love really was weakness in their world. Eleanor refused to accept that. She'd spent too many years being invisible, accepting what the world told her she deserved. She wasn't going back to that. Not for Antonio Castellano. Not for anyone. She'd found something worth fighting for. And she'd be damned if she'd let fear steal it away. Luca's plan unfolded with surgical precision over the next 2 weeks. Eleanor watched from the relative safety of the mansion as he orchestrated moves that would have made Sun Tzu proud. Financial audits mysteriously appeared targeting Antonio's legitimate businesses. Shipments went missing or got delayed at customs. Political allies suddenly found themselves under investigation for unrelated matters. It was death by 1,000 cuts, each one calculated to weaken Antonio's empire without giving him a clear target for retaliation. But Antonio wasn't stupid. He knew exactly who was behind his problems. The response came on a cold January evening when Eleanor was alone in Luca's study, reading while she waited for him to return from a meeting. She heard the explosion before she felt it, a deep, resonant boom that shook the windows and sent books tumbling from shelves. Alarms shrieked through the house as Eleanor stumbled to her feet, her heart in her throat. The front gate. Someone had bombed the front gate. Guards flooded the corridors, shouting instructions as they secured the perimeter. Mrs. Chen appeared at the study door, her face pale but composed. Miss Bennet, you need to come with me, now. Eleanor followed her through a hidden door in the study's paneling, down a narrow staircase she'd never known existed. They emerged in what appeared to be a reinforced safe room beneath the house, all concrete walls and emergency supplies. 2 guards stood inside, weapons drawn. Mr. Moretti's orders, Mrs. Chen said. You stay here until he gives the all clear, no matter what you hear, no matter how long it takes. Where is he? Is he safe? He's handling it. That's all I know. Mrs. Chen squeezed her shoulder. He'll come for you when it's over. Just stay here and stay quiet. The door sealed shut, leaving Eleanor alone with the guards in the oppressive silence of the safe room. She sat on the edge of a cot, her hands trembling, listening to muffled sounds from above. Shouting, running footsteps. What might have been gunfire, though it was hard to tell through the thick walls. Minutes crawled by like hours. Eleanor counted them obsessively, marking time by her racing heartbeat. 10 minutes, 20, 30. Still no word from Luca. She was beginning to truly panic when her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Rooftop, alone, or the next bomb is inside the house. Eleanor's blood turned to ice. She showed the message to one of the guards, whose expression darkened. Don't respond. It's a trap. What if it's not? What if they really will bomb the house? Eleanor's mind raced. There are people up there. Mrs. Chen, the staff. How many people will die if I don't go? Miss Bennet, Mr. Moretti gave explicit orders. I know what he ordered, but I also know Antonio is using me to get to him. If I can draw Antonio's attention away from everyone else, maybe I can buy Luca time to end this. She stood, her decision made even as fear tried to paralyze her. I'm going. You can either help me or try to stop me, but I'm going either way. The guards exchanged glances. Finally, the older one nodded grimly. We go with you, armed, and at the first sign of trouble, we're getting you out of there. They made their way up through the house, moving carefully through corridors that seemed eerily quiet after the initial chaos. Eleanor's heart hammered as they climbed the final staircase to the rooftop access. The door stood slightly ajar, cold air whistling through the gap. The older guard pushed it open carefully, his weapon raised. The rooftop spread out before them, empty except for the scattered lawn furniture and the city lights glittering in the distance. Empty, except for the man standing at the far edge. Antonio Castellano was smaller than Eleanor had imagined, perhaps 5'10", with silver hair and the kind of face that might have been handsome if not for the cruelty in his eyes. He wore an expensive suit and held a phone in one hand, completely relaxed despite the armed guards pointing weapons at him. Miss Bennet. His voice was smooth, cultured. Thank you for joining me. Tell your dogs to lower their weapons or I make a call and this entire building comes down around our ears. The older guard didn't budge. You're surrounded, Castellano. There's no way out of this for you. You misunderstand. I'm not here to escape. I'm here to deliver a message. Antonio's eyes fixed on Eleanor. Come closer, my dear. Let's talk like civilized people. Stay where you are, Miss Bennet, the guard ordered. But Eleanor saw the phone in Antonio's hand, saw his finger hovering over the screen, and made a choice. She stepped forward, ignoring the guard's protest, until she stood 10 feet from Antonio Castellano. I'm here. What do you want? I want to understand what makes you so special. What you have that convinced Luca Moretti to abandon his father's legacy of strength for this weak imitation of leadership. Antonio studied her like a scientist examining an interesting specimen. You're pretty enough, I suppose, but not extraordinary. You clearly have some intelligence, or you wouldn't have survived this long in our world. But there must be something else, something that made him vulnerable. I don't make him vulnerable. I make him human. There's a difference. Is there? Antonio's smile was cold, because from where I stand, his humanity is precisely what's destroying his empire. His refusal to respond to threats with overwhelming force. His reluctance to use fear as a tool of control. His insistence on mercy when strength is what's required. All of it stems from his fear of becoming his father, from his weakness. If he were weak, you wouldn't be so desperate to eliminate him. Antonio's expression flickered with something that might have been respect. Fair point. Luca is formidable in his way, which is precisely why I need to break him now before he becomes truly dangerous. And the way to break him is through you. You think threatening me will make him reckless, make him easy to kill. I think losing you will destroy whatever remnants of humanity he's clinging to. He'll either collapse under the grief, making him vulnerable, or he'll embrace his father's methods completely, which will turn his own people against him. Either way, I win. Antonio took a step closer. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to come with me now, quietly and without resistance. You're going to serve as my guest while I negotiate new terms with Luca. And if he's smart, he'll accept those terms and you'll be returned unharmed. If he's not, well, I'm sure you can imagine the alternatives. Eleanor's hands were shaking, but she kept her voice steady. And if I refuse? Then I press a button and everyone in this house dies in the next 30 seconds. You, the guards, Mrs. Chen, every single person loyal to Luca. Is that really the choice you want to make? She heard footsteps behind her, knew the guards were preparing to act. Knew that any second now, this rooftop would become a bloodbath. And she thought about Luca, about the fear in his eyes when he'd made her promise to run if things went wrong, about Sophia and how her death had nearly destroyed him. She couldn't let that happen again. Wouldn't let Antonio turn her into the weapon that broke Luca. Okay, she said quietly. I'll come with you. Just don't hurt anyone else. Eleanor, no! The older guard started, but she cut him off. Tell Luca I'm sorry. Tell him I kept my promise. Tell him, her voice cracked. Tell him not to come for me. Tell him to let me go and stay safe. How touching! Antonio gestured to someone Eleanor couldn't see, and two more men appeared from the rooftop access on the opposite side. Take her, carefully. She's valuable cargo. They moved toward her, and Eleanor prepared herself for whatever came next. But before they could reach her, a voice cut through the night air. She's not going anywhere with you, Antonio. Luca stood in the doorway Eleanor had come through, flanked by a dozen armed men. He looked completely calm, but Eleanor could see the rage burning in his eyes. Let her go, now, and maybe I'll let you leave this rooftop alive. Antonio laughed. Threatening me, Luca? That's new. I thought you were above such crude tactics. I'm above nothing when it comes to protecting what's mine. Luca's voice was deadly quiet. You made a mistake coming here. An even bigger mistake threatening her. Now you're going to pay for both. Am I? Because from where I stand, I have all the leverage. My men have weapons aimed at every single one of your people. One word from me and this turns into a massacre. Is that really what you want? Is it what you want? Luca took a step forward and Eleanor saw the careful strategy in his movements. Because I've spent the last 2 weeks dismantling your empire piece by piece. Your financial holdings are frozen. Your shipping operations are under federal investigation. Your political allies are distancing themselves faster than you can buy new ones. Your own lieutenants are questioning whether following you is worth the cost. Antonio's smile faltered. You're bluffing. Call Vincent right now and ask him who's sitting in your office going through your files. Call Marco and ask him where your shipment from Rotterdam ended up. Call anyone in your organization and ask them if they still believe you're invincible. Luca's voice hardened. You came here thinking I was weak because I choose strategy over brutality. But strategy is what's destroying you, Antonio. While you were planning this dramatic confrontation, I was systematically eliminating every pillar holding up your empire. Eleanor watched Antonio's face cycle through emotions, disbelief, anger, and finally fear. He looked at the phone in his hand, then back at Luca. You want to press that button? Luca continued. Go ahead. Kill everyone on this rooftop, including yourself. Because you're surrounded by my people, Antonio. Every exit is blocked. Every escape route is covered. The only way you leave here is if I let you, and right now I'm not feeling particularly merciful. If you kill me, my people will retaliate. They'll come after everyone you care about. Your people are currently negotiating their surrender to Vincent. Turns out, when given the choice between dying for a leader who's run out of options or switching sides to the winning team, most people choose survival. Luca's smile was sharp and cold. You're alone, Antonio. You have no cards left to play. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to let Eleanor walk away. You're going to drop that phone, and you're going to pray that I'm in a forgiving mood. And if I refuse, then you become an example, a demonstration to everyone else who might think about threatening what's mine. I'll make sure your death is public, memorable, and serves as a warning that will echo through this city for years. Luca's eyes were ice. Your choice. Live and walk away with nothing, or die and become a cautionary tale. The silence stretched out, tense and brittle. Eleanor held her breath, watching Antonio's face as he calculated his options and found them all wanting. Finally, slowly, he lowered the phone. Smart choice, Luca said. Now the phone. On the ground. carefully. Antonio complied, and one of Luca's men immediately secured it. Antonio's backup, the two men who'd been moving toward Eleanor, were quickly disarmed and restrained. The older guard gently pulled Eleanor back, putting distance between her and Antonio. Luca crossed the rooftop until he stood face to face with his enemy. "You're going to leave this city, Antonio, tonight. You're going to take what's left of your people and you're going to disappear. If I ever see you again, if I ever hear your name in connection with my operations, if you ever so much as think about the people I care about, I will finish what I started." "Do you understand?" Antonio's jaw clenched, but he nodded. "I understand." "Good." Luca stepped back. "Get him out of my sight." As guards escorted Antonio away, Luca finally turned to Eleanor. The mask of cold control cracked, and she saw the fear and relief flooding through him. He crossed to her in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms with enough force to steal her breath. "You promised you'd run," he said against her hair, his voice shaking. "You promised you'd use the envelope and get out if things went wrong." "I kept my promise. I was going to go with him to protect you and everyone else." "That's running towards safety, isn't it?" "That's running towards suicide." He pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face. "Don't ever do that again. Don't ever sacrifice yourself for me. I can't." His voice broke. "I can't lose you." "You won't. We won. It's over." Eleanor covered his hands with hers. "You were brilliant, strategic, everything you needed to be. You proved you're not your father, Luca. You proved mercy backed by strength is its own kind of power." I was terrified. The admission cost him. When I saw that text on the security feed, when I realized he had you on this rooftop, all my strategy evaporated. All I could think was that I was about to lose you the way I lost Sophia, that I'd been too slow, too careful, too late. But you weren't. You were exactly who you needed to be. And now it's over. Antonio's gone. The threat is neutralized. We're safe. Luca searched her face, and Eleanor saw the moment he finally let himself believe it. The tension bled from his shoulders, and he pulled her close again, just holding her while the city spread out around them and the night air carried away the last remnants of fear. "I love you," he said quietly. "I've been too afraid to say it, too worried that saying it would make it real and make you vulnerable. But I love you, Eleanor Bennett. You've made me believe I can be something other than what I was raised to be. You've made me want to build something better than what my father left behind." Eleanor's eyes burned with tears. "I love you too. Have for a while now, even when I was trying to convince myself it was too dangerous, too complicated, too impossible. But nothing about this has been safe or simple, and we survived anyway. Together." "Together," he echoed, and kissed her with everything he'd been holding back, all the fear and love and desperate relief that they'd made it through the fire intact. When they finally pulled apart, Eleanor saw the future spreading out before them, no longer shrouded in threat and violence. "What happens now?" "Now we rebuild. I've been thinking about what you said, about changing my world instead of being trapped by it, about choosing differently." Luca took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "I want to start transitioning the family's operations. Move away from the things that require violence and toward legitimate businesses. It won't be quick. There are people who'll resist. But with Antonio gone and his organization scattered, I have the leverage to make changes, to build something better." "That's a big undertaking." "I know, which is why I'll need help. Someone I trust completely. Someone who sees possibilities I miss. Someone who's not afraid to tell me when I'm wrong." His eyes held hers. "I want you with me, Eleanor. Not as my barista or my secret or my weakness, as my partner in everything." Eleanor's heart swelled. "Yes, whatever that looks like, however complicated it gets. Yes. It's going to be complicated. The family won't all accept you immediately. There will be people who see you as an outsider, who question your place in my life. Vincent already thinks you make me soft. Then we'll prove him wrong. We'll show them that strength comes in different forms, that choosing strategy over violence, mercy over cruelty, doesn't make you weak. It makes you smarter." Eleanor squeezed his hand. "You've already started proving it, Luca. Tonight, you outmaneuvered a man everyone thought was invincible. You did it without becoming your father. without sacrificing who you are. I did it for you, because losing you was unacceptable, because you've become the thing I fight for, the reason I want to build something better." He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I have a proposition for you." "Another one?" His smile was warm, genuine, nothing like the cold mask he showed the world. "Come with me to Sicily, to the villa I told you about. Let's take some time away from all this. From the empire and the expectations and the constant weight of decisions. Let's just be Eleanor and Luca for a while, without the danger and the fear." "How long?" "As long as we need. Vincent can handle things here. He's been wanting more responsibility anyway. This will prove he's capable." Luca pulled her closer until their foreheads touched. "I want to show you where my family came from, before we became what we are now. I want to walk on beaches and drink wine and talk about everything except strategy and survival. I want to remember what it feels like to just live, without constantly looking over my shoulder." Eleanor thought about the villa by the sea, about a place far from the violence and complexity of the city, a place where they could breathe, where they could build something real without the constant threat of it being torn away. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow, if you're willing. I've already made the arrangements, just in case." "You were that confident I'd say yes. I was that hopeful." He kissed her softly. "Say yes, Eleanor. Come away with me. Let's start figuring out what our future looks like when we're not just fighting to survive." "Yes," she said, and felt the last piece of fear fall away. "Let's go build something beautiful." They left the rooftop together, Luca's arm around her waist, surrounded by guards, but feeling safer than Eleanor had felt in months. As they descended through the mansion, she caught sight of Mrs. Chen watching them with a knowing smile. Vincent stood in the hallway, his expression still skeptical, but tinged with what might have been grudging respect. "The jet will be ready at dawn," Vincent said as they passed. "I've arranged security at the villa. You'll be safe there." "Thank you, Vincent." Luca paused. "You'll hold things together while I'm gone?" "That's my job. Just come back ready to make the changes you've been talking about. The family needs a new direction, and after tonight, you've earned the right to provide it." It was as close to approval as Vincent had ever given, and Eleanor saw the relief flash across Luca's face. They continued to his private quarters, where they spent the night wrapped in each other, talking about dreams and possibilities, and all the ways their lives might unfold now that survival was no longer their only goal. When dawn broke over the city, they were on a private plane heading south and east, leaving behind the empire of violence and fear for something softer, something real. Eleanor watched the city disappear beneath them and felt like she was shedding a skin, the invisible girl who'd served coffee and never expected to be seen, the woman who'd learned to move through a dangerous world without losing herself. She was becoming someone new, someone who'd chosen love over safety, partnership over independence, visibility over the comfortable anonymity that had protected her for so long. And sitting beside her, his hand warm in hers, was the man who'd seen her when no one else did, who'd proven that power and compassion could coexist, that choosing mercy didn't mean choosing weakness, that building something better than what you inherited was possible even in the darkest circumstances. The villa appeared as they crested a hill in the hired car, all white stone and terracotta tiles, perched on a cliff overlooking the impossibly blue Mediterranean. It was beautiful and remote and entirely theirs, at least for now. Luca helped her out of the car, and they stood together looking out over the sea, breathing salt air and freedom. "My grandmother used to bring me here when I was young," he said. "Before my father's empire consumed everything. She'd tell me stories about our family from centuries ago, before we became what we are now. Fishermen and farmers. Simple people living simple lives." "Do you wish you could go back to that? To simplicity?" "Sometimes. But then I remember that those simple lives gave my family no power to protect themselves, no resources to survive when things got hard. What I wish is that we could find a balance, keeping the strength and resources we've built while redirecting them towards something that doesn't require constant violence to maintain." "You will. We will." Eleanor turned to face him, the Mediterranean wind whipping her hair around her face. "It won't happen overnight, but you've already started. You've already proven there's another way." He kissed her then, slow and deep and full of promise, and Eleanor felt her grandmother's bracelet warm against her wrist. Freedom, the bird charm had always represented, the freedom to choose your own path, to fly wherever your heart led. She'd chosen this, chosen him, chosen to be visible, to be vulnerable, to be brave enough to believe in something better than what she'd known. And as they walked hand in hand toward the villa, toward a future they'd build together from scratch, Eleanor realized she'd never felt freer in her life. Over the following weeks, they settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Luca made calls to Vincent, maintaining oversight of the business back home, but the urgency was gone. The immediate threats had been neutralized. Antonio's organization had collapsed, his people either absorbed into Luca's operations or scattered to other cities. The family had stabilized, and the respect Luca had earned through his strategic dismantling of Antonio's empire gave him the leverage to start making the changes he'd promised. Meanwhile, Eleanor discovered the man beneath the mask, the Luca who laughed easily when they cooked dinner together, who read to her from his philosophy books in Italian, then translated the passages he found most meaningful, who taught her to swim in the hidden cove below the villa, who woke early to watch the sunrise and stayed up late to count stars. They talked about everything, their childhoods, their fears, their dreams for a future that seemed suddenly possible. Eleanor told him about the teaching degree she'd abandoned, about her love of literature and her belief that education could transform lives. Luca told her about the legitimate businesses he wanted to develop, about using his family's resources to build something that helped people instead of hurting them. And slowly, carefully, they built a foundation that had nothing to do with survival and everything to do with choosing each other, day after day, in 1,000 small ways. One evening, about 6 weeks into their stay, they sat on the terrace watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Luca had been quiet all day, thoughtful in a way that made Eleanor think something was shifting beneath the surface. "I've made a decision," he said finally, "about the family, about our future." Eleanor set down her wine glass and turned to face him. "What kind of decision?" "I'm stepping back. Not entirely. I'll still maintain oversight, still be available for major decisions. But I'm promoting Vincent to handle day-to-day operations. He's earned it, and more importantly, it frees me to focus on building the legitimate side of the business." Luca took her hand. "I want to create something new, Eleanor. A foundation that funds education in underserved communities. Business ventures that create jobs instead of destroying them. I want to use everything my father built and turn it into something that actually helps people." "That's ambitious." "I know. It'll take years, maybe decades, and I can't do it alone." His eyes held hers. "I need someone who understands what it means to struggle, who knows what it's like to be invisible, to be overlooked, to fight for every opportunity. Someone who believes education and opportunity can change lives." Eleanor's breath caught. "Are you asking me to work with you?" "I'm asking you to build this with me. Use your experience, your education, your perspective. Help me figure out how to make a real difference. Be my partner in creating something that outlasts both of us." Tears blurred her vision. "Yes, absolutely yes." He kissed her, gentle and certain, and Eleanor felt the last piece of her old life fall away. She was no longer the invisible waitress trying to survive. She was no longer defined by what she'd lost or what she'd been denied. She was someone with agency, with purpose, with the resources to make a real impact. She was seen, she was valued, she was free. They returned to the city 3 months after they'd left, and Eleanor barely recognized the woman who stepped off the plane. She carried herself differently now, shoulders back, head high, no apology in her presence. She'd learned to navigate Luca's world without losing herself, to be visible without being vulnerable, to be strong in ways that had nothing to do with violence. The mansion felt different too, less like a fortress and more like a home. Luca had made changes in their absence, removed some of the armed guards, opened up some of the closed-off spaces, made the place feel less like a military installation and more like somewhere people actually lived. Vincent met them in the foyer, and Eleanor saw the change in his expression when he looked at her. Not warmth exactly, but respect. Acknowledgement that she'd proven herself, that her presence in Luca's life hadn't made him weaker. "Welcome back," Vincent said. "We have a lot to discuss." They spent the next weeks laying groundwork for the foundation, for the transition of the family's operations toward legitimate business, for the future they were building together. It was hard work, complicated, and sometimes frustrating, but Eleanor found herself energized by it. This was what her grandmother had meant about freedom, not the absence of responsibility, but the ability to choose which responsibilities you took on, to build something meaningful with your life. 6 months after that night on the rooftop, the foundation officially launched. The Bennett Moretti Educational Foundation, named for both of them, dedicated to providing scholarships and resources to kids who'd been invisible for too long. Kids like Eleanor